5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here come the Astros, burning with desire. Here come the Astros, breathing orange fire. Here come the Astros, with winning on their mind. Here come the Astros, number one every time. Go, go, Astros. We want Houston! We want Houston! Alvarez hits a high drive, center field. Veerling's back! This game is turned upside down!
And the pitch is lifted to right by Castellanos. Long run for Tucker, over toward the line, and foul territory. Makes the catch, and the Houston Astros do it again! 2022 World Series champions!
And now, Go Astros. Astros baseball from three guys who've been there since Art Howe had hair.
And welcome everybody back to Go Astros. It is Devil's Night, my favorite holiday, October 30th. The Crow came out 29 years ago today when this Astros logo was also being worn. As always, with us today, Andy Tom Chesson. Andy, how you doing, man? How are you feeling about this Love You Blue nonsense?
I don't know about that quite yet, but I know my hair is honoring 1994 because it decided to do Joe Kane from the program this morning.
Oh, my Lord. Kane is able. And Brian Arbor. Brian, I'd like to see, are you doing anything with your hair today? I know that was a low blow.
So I have not done anything with my hair since 1994, basically. So I fit in with
Full
the theme
circle.
here.
You know, I bet our fans think this is scripted. Nope, we are off the cuff, everybody.
I don't think they believe that at all.
Yeah, we got a little bit to talk about today, and we're going to do our best to keep everything fun and positive. The big news that I think happened that came as some relief to Astros fans are Dusty leaving, and we're going to talk about Dusty. But the first thing I want to talk about, and it's this magical question, and a lot of it came out of I think this interview with Derek Jeter, who basically, look, he's Derek Jeter. He's Derek Jeter for a reason. That a season that does not end in a World Series championship is not successful. Obviously, we are fans. We have a different measure. Brian, 2023 Astros, was that a successful season for you?
So, yes. Now, I listened to, this is a national podcast called Effectively Wild. They have, in their previews at the beginning of the season, they asked, they have a reporter from each team, they had Chandler Rome, and they asked them what would count as success for this team. And for each of the last 2 years, Chandler said, well, all they talk about is World Series. They keep going to the World Series. There's really nothing that could be successful other than a World Series. And that's not an illegitimate viewpoint. Because obviously this team is at a point where, hey, it lost in maybe not crushing fashion, but certainly disappointing fashion, right? It ended in ways that we weren't happy with. Take any step back from the golden era, though, and hey, being one of the four best teams in baseball, playing to the end of it, they did that twice in the first 40 years of this franchise, basically. Through our childhood, just winning the AOS once was the National League West in 1986 was sort of the singular achievement of our childhood. And from any perspective other than the last couple of years, yeah, absolutely a successful season. Was it a frustrating season? Yes, it was as well, but a successful season, yes.
Andy, you and I are on every pitch together. Successful season for you as a fan. I understand Alex Bregman's going to have a different answer, and he should. But for you.
I think when you're in the middle of it as a player, yeah, you can be Derek Jeter, and you can especially be Derek Jeter because he won 5 championships as a player. So he has that kind of latitude to say the other 15 seasons of my career sucked, and because I have 5 rings. I'm considered one of the greatest shortstops to ever play for the Yankees, which is the best franchise by just about every measure in Major League Baseball. You're welcome, Emily.
Well, I was just saying, we're going to make that one of the, if we had one of those things at the beginning, that would be that.
However, it is begging back to the nature of what baseball is versus what football or basketball even are from a professional level. There are all kinds of different levels of success. To Brian's point, I think anytime you're in the final four of a professional sports league at the end of the year, it's a successful season. They won a division championship. The sport recognizes those as things that are meaningful. So that is something that the Astros absolutely obtained. And there's a lot of years that teams don't do that. You look at the Mariners, they would have loved to keep a division championship this year, and that'd be the end of it. They didn't even do that. So yeah, it's successful. And it gets down to the heart of really not understanding what baseball is for the marathon that it is, because there are plenty of people arguing online right now that, and I think rightfully so, Jose Altuve is the greatest Astro who has ever played for the Astros, but right behind him are Craig Biggio and Jeff Bagwell, who had none of the success in the postseason that Alex Bregman or Jose Altuve or Yordan Alvarez has had.
I mean, Martin Maldonado. I mean,
right. But, and that's you can't have it both ways. You can't have great players only because of what they've done in the postseason. Yuli Gurriel is not a better first baseman than Jeff Bagwell.
No. Yeah, and I think this comes back to what I've said on the show a bunch, where the more the playoffs become a crapshoot. And I do think like this year was exciting, and a big part of that was the expanded playoffs. And for as much as some of us, not us, but us at large, bemoan that, I think it has been good for the game. But the more that you now dive into a postseason that goes against the very nature of how baseball is structured for the regular season, you have to say that you win a division championship, that is success. And in many ways, that is the most reflective success of the year that you have had. Because we all know that this Rangers series versus the Astros could have gone in many different ways if it had been played at any other different time of the year. And if the umpires would quit screwing the Rangers, they might be up 2-0 in the World Series. I don't believe that, but that's what they think.
8 run walks.
Yeah. So Dusty is gone. Andy, there's been a lot of talk about it. What's weird about this is you've got a contingent of people that are saying, well, Dusty's always sucked, I'm glad he's gone. And then you have another people that I think are putting him in a more correct place in Astros history. But you think about some of the managers the Astros have had, where do you put him as far as where he sits in that ranking or that group?
I mean, he's got to be one of the top 3, maybe 4 managers who have ever coached the franchise. I mean, it is what it is. He had 4 ALCS appearances, 2 World Series appearances, and 1 World Series championship. I don't know what else you can do other than have picked up another World Series championship this year. He came in at a time where the Astros needed somebody who was likable to the general baseball population, that was respected by managers and other coaches on the team, and for somebody who would be kind of above reproach from a standpoint of the things the Astros were accused of doing in 2017 and parts of 2018. So he served a purpose. I'm not sad to see him go, but I think anybody telling you that he wasn't successful here, it's a really weird take. And it's a little bit of revisionist history, because there were no Dusty haters last year when we won 106 games. There were plenty of Dusty haters here when we only won 90 games, with virtually the same roster. So at some point, coaching matters, being the manager matters, but players have to have some responsibility and a regression as well. And I can't place Framber Valdez's issues, Christian Javier's issues, Jose Abreu's issues, a host of others, Jose Altuve's injury, Yordan Alvarez's injury, on Dusty Baker solely. Did he do some questionable things this year? 100%. Did he refuse?
He did some questionable things last year. That's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not new. I mean, that's not. It's part of being manager. Things go wrong. We say it's your fault.
Yeah. The biggest thing is the Yainer Diaz, Martin Maldonado thing, but it kind of is what it is at some point. It worked last year. It didn't work this year. At the end of the day, I don't think there's any measure that you can go Dusty bad. That's not a take that makes any sense to me.
Brian, how about you?
Yeah, 2 points I want to make here. One is the Astros managerial history is modest. There have been 3. No, there have been 3 managers in Astros history who have managed 5 seasons or more with the team. So in sort of looking at sort of the Astros managerial pantheon, it's not much. Bill Burton managed 6 and change. He was fired in his 7th season, and the other 2 who managed 5 years were AJ Hinch, would be the greatest man. It's probably the best argument for the greatest manager, and certainly would have been without the sign stealing scandal. And then Art Hack, who was the definition of 81 and 81 as the Astros manager, basically. He had a tough hand because he was here for the rebuild. So the pantheon isn't there. I think either the greatest manager in franchise history is either Hinch or Baker. I have a slight preference to Hinch, mostly because I think the degree of difficulty of coming into a team that it was losing, and rebuilding that is higher. But if you tell me that if you think the degree of difficulty was Dusty's situation, which Andy laid out, is more difficult, I won't argue with you. That's certainly a plausible sort of argument.
All right,
On
so
Dusty
obviously,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Brian, go ahead.
Well, and Dusty itself, and I wrote a lot of detail on this on my Substack about Dusty. Dusty's sort of biggest managerial philosophy is he was a player's manager, and particularly focused on his veteran and star players, and a lot of his sort of inside how he talked and how he sort of managed and drew out lineups was based on making them as comfortable as possible, making them so they had the least amount of distractions from their job. And that was in 2 ways. One is, in which I thought he did really well throughout his career, but especially here in Houston, was any type of flare-up that happened among the players usually was gone within 24 hours. There was never these sort of lingering media stories about sort of clubhouse tension and whatever there was. Sometimes would bubble up and sometimes would come out, but it usually wouldn't last. And part of that is sort of having a manager who has lived through this stuff before. Is like, hey, whatever ego you have, you don't have Barry Bonds' ego. And I've dealt with that, so I can deal with you. And it's part of it. And the difficulty this year is sort of focusing on the veterans and their comfort meant, as you said, Yainer Diaz in particular got a lot fewer at-bats than he probably should have because, Justin Verlander needs Martin Maldonado as his personal catcher. And, at some level, we just have to live through having less offense as a result of that.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the blow-ups that happened in 4 years, Jake Odorizzi, and then what is probably
that was like the most polite blow up ever, right? Like it was.
Well, I mean, he was pissed he got pulled, and then he didn't, and it was squashed in 24 hours. To Brian's point, the other thing that just pops up to mind is the beef apparently between Chas McCormick's brother and Dusty Baker, because nobody else seems to want to go on record that this is a thing. So I'm going to go Chas McCormick's brother and Dusty. That might not have gotten resolved the way it needed to, but banana pudding fixes a lot of wounds.
Even if your player's fat. So we've got obviously the managerial search is up and coming. And in some ways, those are a lot of fun because you can, it's maybe less fun when your team is really, really good, but usually when your team is struggling, it's at least a hope to the future. A lot of candidates out there. I'm kind of in the sort of, I'm hoping it's Espada, and Jeff Bannister kind of intrigues me a little bit, and some others, but I'll start with Andy again on this one. Andy, what is it about Brad Ausmus that makes him not a good candidate, except for the fact that he knows Jeff Bagwell? Because from what I understand, he actually was pretty analytically forward. I think Verlander actually gives him some credit to making him look at analytics a bit more. We'll go with you and then to Brian on this. Andy, what is it about him that really is bad?
So, despite the fact that he is first on everybody's list as far as the sports reporters go, I'm not convinced that he's actually a candidate for this job. He may be end up being the person that's getting hired, but when you have people like Bob Nightingale telling you he was the runner-up to Dusty in 2019 or 2020, that's not a real thing. He wasn't the runner-up. He wasn't the runner-up for the GM job. Matter of fact, there's some question about whether or not he actually interviewed for the GM
I don't think he
job,
yeah.
Or it was a front office job, because I don't think the Astros were about to put somebody with zero front office experience in as their GM. But it's a narrative that we've run with. And the narrative is that he is a manager. He is currently unemployed. He wants to be a manager again. He's good friends with Jeff Bagwell. The initial difficulty with Brad Ausmus as a candidate is that he has not won consistently anywhere he's been, although he did have a 90-win season in Detroit when they weren't rebuilding. He did have another 86-win team with Detroit when they were kind of rebuilding, and then it cratered there. And then he was at the helm of the Los Angeles, California, Anaheim Angels when they were dealing drugs to their players and somebody died.
And that to me, by the way, Brian, remember that to me, when we get to you, that's to me the biggest disqualifier, that right there. Andy, continue.
And you know, whether he was involved in that on any level or didn't know about it, I think either one of those things is pretty damning. Same reason, you know, from a much different level thing that AJ Hinch is ultimately relieved of his job. If you didn't know about it, you should have. And if you did know about it, you should have stopped it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you know, or fortunately, the Astros situation didn't result in somebody dying. Ausmus he's smart. I can't imagine that he's actually somebody who would like to ignore analytics and wouldn't use information to his advantage, because I think any catcher has done that through most of their careers. There are very few grip it and rip it catchers who go on to be any kind of coach, manager, what have you. I do think there are better candidates out there, though. And I think he would have a tough road to hoe because of the association and the weird hatred for Jeff Bagwell. I get the concerns about Jeff Bagwell's influence in the organization.
Yeah, me too.
I don't get the hatred for Jeff Bagwell. And I know it's Twitter where I'm getting most of this hatred from, and there's, you know, different degrees of idiocy on that app, but that to me is the biggest hurdle he would have to overcome, because the first time he does something that the fan base doesn't like or very clearly cost a game, I think he loses the fan base. And that's a really weird position for a manager to be in, especially one who played like 10 years here. So
right. Yeah,
I think there are better candidates, but I wouldn't lose sleep over it if Brad Ausmus was the manager opening spring training.
Brian, yeah, weigh in on that too, because I was thinking about this where if I list my top 5 candidates, Ausmus isn't on them, and it's nothing to do with who he is or isn't friends with. But to me, the I'm a big believer in the buck stops where it stops, and a guy died on your watch, and we can find a guy who didn't have a guy die on his watch.
Yeah, which is just about everyone else.
Everyone else, yeah.
Everyone else.
That's not the hardest qualifier to get past in this sport.
You didn't kill a guy. Congrats.
Yeah, you know. The bigger sort of issue to me is Ausmus's time in Detroit. And look, the roster got worse there. It's not the record thing, but it seemed to be a clubhouse that lacked energy. It seemed to be a clubhouse where it doesn't seem like his job as manager is something to recommend him going forward, not because the team did poorly. Hey, they had a 90-win season, as Andy said, in his first season, but that's because they still had Miguel Cabrera in his prime and Justin Verlander, you know, before he got, you know, he had some injuries there, which hurt him. And they just didn't collapse. They didn't sort of collapse because they got old, which is what happened in Detroit while he was there. Again, I'd certainly talk to Verlander a good deal about what happened there, because he's going to understand that and give you, I think, something candid about it if he's a candidate. One broader point to make on the list that had been produced so far, which are presumably by McTaggart, Chandler Rome, and I guess Nightingale, but Nightingale's is not sort of a detailed list. There's no clear reporting going on to me, and that my sources tell me this is who they're looking at. It is mostly, you know, because if you look at the bottom of these lists, it's here are some guys with the Braves who would be managerial candidates.
Okay.
And Dana Brown knows them. Okay. Which may be fine. I will get past my, you know, all the terrible things I said about Walt Weiss.
No.
Andy will not. Fair enough. If they hire him, because he'd be a fine candidate based on this. What I would love to see is a really sort of robust and long list of candidates to interview. And part of why is because the decision is going to be made by Jim Crane and Jeff Bagwell, with apparently Dana Brown getting to make some comments.
Although to counter that, Brian, I've seen different reporting from a tagger that said it will be Crane and Brown making the decision, with Bagwell allowing to make some comments. I mean, I don't think we really know.
McTaggart kind of went back on his initial comments that Brown was going to be consulting on the hire.
Yeah, I'm skeptical of that, but you know, we will see sort of what they says and sort of what happens. But you know, here's the sort of issue with Jeff Bagwell. Jeff Bagwell has spent. Hey, the Red Sox just hired a player to be their general manager. The Rangers have a player as their general manager. The Phillies have a player as their general manager, their number two. But these are players who are more recent players than Bagwell, and people who were really into. They went from that to the analytic to being a general manager in front office positions with analytics. Jeff Bagwell, as I best can tell, from 2006 to whenever Crane started talking to him and relying on his baseball judgment, did a bunch of personal appearances. Like, what did Jeff Bagwell learn and advance his knowledge about baseball?
Well, this is a story for another time, but
yeah, but it's actually a key story. Like if Jeff Bagwell's making this, like if Jeff Bagwell's making this, it's one thing to say, "Hey Jeff, will you go with us to talk to Jose Abreu?" Absolutely great use of sort of having Jeff Bagwell. Will you? Hey, do you have some thoughts about this that we can sort of, about this guy or the clubhouse or something? That's, I think that's what Craig Biggio does, and that's absolutely fine. You have this sort of advisory role. It's very clear that he has a key part of the ear of Jim Crane, and he may have more of that than Dana Brown, and particularly about this part of it. And Dana Brown has some parts of the roster and the job that's sort of clearly his, but it's not as much as his two predecessors, or really any of his predecessors. And so, hey, I would love for Bagwell to interview Stephen Vogt, who was a who's a coach with the Mariners this year and a managerial candidate, or the Yankees third base coach, or just people he doesn't know, just so he gets a broader bit of knowledge about sort of how baseball works today and educate himself more, because I don't think he's doing that as much between 2006 and 2022. Hopefully he's been taking a lot of crash courses this year. That would be helpful.
I'd like the viewers to know that I've just had a proton pack turned in. I don't get paid a lot at St. Michael's, so I have to do a couple of extra jobs. I do this show. I fight ghosts on the weekends. It's very tough to be me. Andy, stemming from what Brian said, I want you to respond to what Brian said, but also adding into, I'm a Joe Espada guy, but I think we've also seen in sports where oftentimes the heir apparent, that's maybe not the best choice for a team. Any responses to what Brian said? Any thoughts on Espada specifically?
I mean, I don't disagree with anything Brian said. I think it is hard to, despite what our belief of Jeff Bagwell might be, for him to meet somebody he doesn't know in baseball. He was played for 13 years and has been around the sport the rest of the time when he wasn't in rehab. So allegedly. So just running through the stadium, he's going to run into people and he's going to have a friend of a friend. So he's going to know people. If you're going to consider a Brad Ausmus, the first person I'd go talk to is Justin Verlander, because he's going to have to play for him, and he's played for him before. That's the person to me, if you're hiring a Brad Ausmus type, that you've got to convince him that that's a good choice. And if he backs it, I think that's a kind of a different story. Having said that, I don't really want the retread. One of the most frightening names in any list I've seen, which to Brian's point are all pretty much just made up, and this person knows this person, so they'd probably be a candidate. Buck Showalter scares the hell out of me.
Buck Showalter and Joe Madden being on the list scare the hell out of me. I would take Brad Ausmus over those two for sure.
But I mean, I think there's some interesting things, and I think it's really hard to determine what the criteria is outside of the personality fit, because do you base it on record? Well, AJ Hinch would have never gotten hired. And he had plenty of people in that Diamondbacks clubhouse that did not like him. And I think you find more people that don't like a manager when they're losing than you do when they're winning. When you're winning, everybody loves you, except for Dusty Baker, which is, we already talked about that. Yeah. But I would like to see, to that point, I don't need to see a list, but I'd like the search to be thought out, and not just that we feel at the end of the process that we talked to a couple guys, but we were going to hire Brad Ausmus to begin with. So that's what we ended up doing. If you're going to do that, just do it and rip the Band-Aid off. But if you're going to have a real search, I don't need to know the name of every single candidate, because I think that's somewhat counterproductive, although less so in pro sports than it would be in college. But if we're going to talk to Will Venable, for instance, after the Rangers are done in the World Series, and he's the best candidate, great. Talk to 10 other people too. And talk to people who know Will Venable. And why are you making that choice? Because a 40-year-old manager would be an interesting choice for this Astros team. But just Walt Weiss and Eric Young don't excite me.
What I was going to say is I agree with you there too. To me, if it's a quick choice, then the answer needs to be Joe Espada. And if it's not Joe Espada, then I think it needs to be a big search like you're saying.
I mean, I could also see Rodney Linares being a quick choice. He's well known in the organization. He's coming from Tampa Bay. They are historically an organization that does more with less. We've had some success with, James Click's personality issues with Jim Crane notwithstanding, a guy coming over and translating into what we're trying to do. I think there are a few quick choice type folks, but.
And with as many Latin players as are on the team, having a Latin manager, a Spanish-speaking manager, could be a specific advantage 100%. To the Astros.
We could also just tell Major League Baseball to go to hell and hire Carlos Beltran. Everything is available to us
at this point, right, Brian? Any issue with Carlos Beltran showing back up in a uniform?
He's been broadcasting for the Yankees, so I'd ask him to atone for that. But 20 Hail Marys, and that'll be.
We just put the black uniforms back on every game.
Yeah.
Okay. As long as we bring back Brian McCann with the priest frock to bury his glove again or something,
it all works.
Yeah. Just a general point here about managers is they get more blame than they should and less credit than they should, but the effect they have is modest. And again, the point I made about Dusty in my article, and I think it's important, is the real thing that managers do is manage men. They manage the 26 guys. Dusty was particularly just focused on the 26 guys in the clubhouse. Sometimes you can go a little bit beyond that, but it's really, again, getting those guys and understanding them and making sure they're in the right frame of mind to play baseball. And look, I would love for them to make really good pinch hitting decisions and bring in the right reliever and, make a nice double switch like I do when I play on computer baseball. Or not, since there's a DH, but you get the point, right?
Sure.
But really, that is much less a priority. We think managers have a handful, the best analysis is the managers have a handful of influence a handful of wins over the course of a season.
Yeah, it's like everything else, it's always magnified in the playoffs. But Absolutely. You're right, over a season, if your team is good, you're going to win. If they're not, they're not.
Yeah. And I think that's the bigger thing. It's who do you hire that's able to manage the personalities and egos in that clubhouse over the course of a 162 game season and have them all pulling in the same direction by the time the playoffs roll around. That to me is what is going to be a successful manager or not. AJ Hinch was very good at that because there were some large egos on that 17 team, even though they were young. They didn't get less ego-y as the years rolled by. And Dusty inherited most of that group and kept them on that same track. So that to me is a whole lot more important than Martin Maldonado's usage.
Well, and like that to me is what disqualifies Joe Madden, because I don't want somebody who thinks he's a tough guy and coming in there and trying to kick a bunch of ass to a really.
It would be fun to watch him shave his hair into a mohawk again the day he's getting fired.
The day he's getting fired. Yeah, that would be fun. Hopefully Martin Maldonado can lend him his hairspray too. But yeah, I don't want that guy coming in there trying to kick ass on a team that really just needs someone to guide the ship, to Brian's point, keep everybody together.
The best player on the Astros is Jose Altuve, who is the next time Jose Altuve says something that seems selfish or egotistical or not, I'm just here to help the team, will be the first.
Yeah.
Alex Bregman, who has a much bigger personality and a much bigger ego from that standpoint, is also the biggest grinder on the team. So, I don't think they need anyone to kick ass or give motivational speeches. That's one, you see a lot less of that today. And two, what we've seen, and this works much better, is done by the players themselves. They can police themselves than the managers. That is much more effective in any type of endeavor than it being done from the top down.
Yeah, I mean, completely. And, as we kind of get ready to wrap up, we talked about the fact that whether this is a good season or not, or has been a good year, and there's many, many ways to, I guess, go about that. But I thought it would be kind of fun to go around our little group and maybe one really good day or one really good memory you had from this particular season. And Brian, we will start with you.
Yeah, I'm going to pick the comeback in Baltimore, capped off by the Kyle Tucker grand slam off of Felix Bautista. And part of why I picked that is because it is sort of the Astros playing at their best. They were playing, again, the top team in the American League by record. They eventually had to go in the best reliever in Major League Baseball in Felix Bautista. And as I think I've talked about before on the show, I don't think Bautista had a particularly terrible day or was pitching poorly. He ran up against hitters who were locked in at that moment and had better, listen, I thought we blew our chance. Jordan hit that ball that went off, went like a foot from being a homer. The pitch before, and I thought we'd blown our chance by the ball not quite getting out there. And then Tucker came up, I guess, 2 batters later with the grand slam. And so it was, not only a great comeback victory and a fun game to watch, but more importantly, I think it was the team. It's the stars of this team beating another team's stars. It was, I think the best of this team.
What many people thought was an ALCS preview. Andy.
I want to take you back to Labor Day 2023. What was that? Almost 2 months ago now. The Astros had won 5 in a row, and then randomly, as a bad precursor to what was about to happen for the rest of the season, lost 3 to the Yankees, a really, really bad Yankees team, and we did not play well. And then
we apologize to you, Emily Nyman, for that part.
Yeah. Then we had to go on the road.
Not sorry, Emily.
To Arlington to play the Rangers. And the Astros won 3 games, and all of us, at least I think all of us, were seeing the team that we finally thought we were going to see this year. The Astros won on Labor Day, 13-6. JP France went 5 innings, gave up 5 runs, but accounted himself well. The offense shows up in the 5th inning and proceeds to blast the Rangers out of Arlington, wiping that Yankees series taste out of your mouth. The next day, Framber Valdez was an effective pitcher for, I think, the last time this year. Went 7 innings, allowed 1 run, and we beat the Rangers 14-1. The next day, it was the big Scherzer-Verlander showdown. We won 12-3. Verlander went 7 innings, allowing 1 run. That's the 7 RBI Jose Abreu game where he hit a line drive, 3-run homer to follow his grand slam earlier in the game. That was maybe the most fun that I had this year from a series standpoint, and it wasn't really competitive baseball, but everything was clicking. We were playing defense well. We were certainly pitching well, and the offense was firing on all cylinders. We didn't see it a lot before that, and I don't know that we saw it again after that. You could argue once we got back to Arlington, maybe in the ALCS, but that was bittersweet as I look back on it, because it was a lot of fun, and it was okay. We're finally all healthy. Everybody's doing well. And then it proceeded to kind of crater from there, where we played less than 500 ball the rest of the season. So that was a high water mark for me.
Yeah. Before I get to mine, I do want to do a quick shout out to Tommy Pham from the Diamondbacks. And there's a really cool story to come out of that World Series where Tommy went 4 for 4 on game 2 and had the opportunity to get a 5th at bat to become, I think, the first person in history to maybe go 5 for 5. And instead, he basically offered to be pinch hit for by Jace Peterson, who was making his first World Series in 10 years, just so he could get an at bat. And I thought that's the level of unselfishness that sometimes you see in this game in particular. So I don't know. It was one of those who can't be romantic about baseball moments. As far as my Astros
hold on. Let me just note, Tommy Pham, good teammate, bad fantasy football competitor.
That's why you tune in, folks. Brian brings you the numbers underneath the numbers. Don't play fantasy.
Well,
and now I cough.
There's actual physical violence involved with Tommy Pham's fantasy football. It's not just he's mad at you.
Oh, well, there you go. Okay, so maybe we don't want him in the clubhouse after all. I was thinking, hey, he might look good in an Astros uniform at some point. No, I got to be in the house for Framber's no hitter, and it was as incredible as you can imagine. It was one of those very efficient games where all of a sudden you look up and it's the 5th inning and he's just moving through guys. That pitch clock is one of those things where it really helped that game sneak up on you. Also bittersweet because we would not see that Framber again for the rest of the year. And I still think there's plenty left in Framber's gas tank. I think he's going to be fine. But the idea that I got to be in the house for a no-hitter, I ordered the ticket. I've got it like framed on my wall, was definitely one of my coolest Astros moments of the year. Before we wrap up and get our final thoughts for everybody, we will be back next week. And then after that, we're going to be basically be going on about an every other week schedule because it turns out we all have things to do. You know, we can't be out here for our Astros fans every single day, nose to the grindstone, sniffing for stories and whatever. So we will be going to every
Where
other
are you going
week.
with that analogy? Where are you going with that analogy, James? Because that's maybe what we're stepping around for. Maybe I'm getting worried about here.
Yeah. As we put it out earlier, this show is not scripted, everyone. So we will be back about every other week, unless something big happens, and then we will hop on with whatever configuration we can put together. But as we wrap up a sort of the regular season end of this, and I get the last thoughts from the guys. Brian, Andy, it's been again a blast. I'm looking forward to getting through Hot Stove, and I don't know, I feel really good about 2024, and I can't wait to do it with you two. See, words.
Is
Anyway,
that because you talk about yourself in the third person a lot?
sometimes I do. Sometimes I have to appreciate myself. And it's my therapist and I are working through that. But that is my final. That is my final thought. Thank you for a great 2023. Fans of the show, but most importantly, Brian and Andy, and Go Astros. Brian.
It is a lot of fun for me to do this show, and more importantly, to get to talk and hang out with the two of you. So thanks for the opportunity to do that. And the multiple time defending AOS champs will be back in 2024. Go Astros.
I'm just saying prayers and doing all my Catholic things to try to prevent Jose Altuve from breaking a thumb and from Yordan Alvarez's rib cage to be healthy for an entire season, and his legs and knees and everything else, his hands. All of Yordan Alvarez should be under a guise of protection. I will be saying novenas and lighting candles for that to happen, because I think if those two things happen, we're back in the ALCS again next year. Go Astros.